the Mayor of Edmonton, Don Iveson. Welcome.
Thank you.
We wanted to talk to you about a few issues and things that the city of Edmonton, obviously you've got your hands full because, I mean, the economy isn't doing so great right now. And
well, actually, the economy's okay. It's the province of Alberta that's not doing so well. I mean, their budget's down 17% because they're overexposed to royalties and the energy business in their revenue mix. But, our city economist is saying the city's economy is going to grow by 2.6% instead of 3%.
Right.
So next year, the economy will be 2.6% larger.
Exactly.
And that's not quite as large as we thought it was going to be. And so the difference is what we're hearing a lot about is something contracting by 17%. And then people can get confused that the Alberta economy is contracting by 17%, which would be catastrophic, but that's not happening. You know, Edmonton is still growing, albeit a little bit slower.
Right.
Parts of Alberta may contract a little bit more if they're more exposed, if they're doing a lot of drilling. Calgary's got lots of layoffs in white-collar oil and gas jobs, and people in Edmonton and in northern Alberta will definitely feel it, but it's not as bad as people are talking about, which is we just have to all be careful we don't talk ourselves into a recession here, actually.
Exactly.
Things aren't too bad, so...
No, well, that was one of the questions we had from our Facebook page. One of the girls had said, how is it possible that we are doing well when the Alberta government, not so much, but it is that focus on oil royalties, right? And that's what they're talking about to switch that over.
Well, I was thinking about this on Family Day, and it was about the same time that Family Day was created, this would be like 4 premiers back, that Alberta really started dipping into resource revenue in order to pay for ongoing things. And that's sort of like selling the farm to pay for the groceries.
Right.
I mean, you need to have enough income from what you're doing from one week to the next to pay for your weekly kind of expenses. And the problem is we're starting to sell the stuff that we own in order to pay for our ongoing expenses. And we've gotten into a bad habit of that over the last 25 years or so, to the point that we actually are, there's about $5 billion left. And and that's not touching the Heritage Fund. There's another 15 there. That fund, we all know that fund should be $100 billion.
Right.
If we were disciplined like the Norwegians or the Alaskans, we would have saved all that money, or at least invested it in schools and hospitals and roads and light rail and infrastructure that was going to support future economic growth. But, it sounds like maybe after 25 years, maybe we're ready to learn from that. Maybe we're ready to make some different decisions. But, yeah, the province is just overexposed in that area.
Definitely. Talking about, we have such a wide listening area, broad-based, and a lot of Aboriginal people. And you talk about some of the things that the city of Edmonton, we had Stephen Mandel in when he was mayor, and he had talked about one of his biggest regrets was not focusing more and doing more for Aboriginal initiatives. What does the city of Edmonton have going on right now? I noticed the pin you're wearing. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean to you? And what's going on in the city right now as far as any kind of Aboriginal initiatives?
Well, lots of work and building, to give credit where credit's due, on some things that Mayor Mandel had done to start strengthening relationships with the urban Aboriginal community in general in all its diversity, and also specifically with Treaty 6 and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Right. So we have formal agreements signed with Treaty 6, and so we do an annual Treaty 6 Recognition Day, and that's about protocol. It's about strengthening relationships, and through that I've had opportunities to meet as a group and individually with a number of the chiefs and with the Grand Chief, and develop a number of different projects, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those. But this year is special for us, and we didn't see it coming, and I think it was easy for us to underestimate how significant it was going to be in terms of transforming our thinking. But this was the year of reconciliation, and the year is almost up, but the work is really just beginning. And this came about in March of last year, March last year, when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission came through, and that was a really transformative event for many of us at the city, because we were involved in helping to host it.
That's right.
And many of my councillors attended, not just 10 minutes to say hello, but came and listened to the survivors and did cultural learning and had a chance to meet with people from all across Western and Northern Canada who had come to this event. And something that was really interesting that Justice Sinclair, who's the sort of head commissioner, reflected on subsequently was that at the first of the 7 national events, which was in Winnipeg a few years ago, it was 90% Indigenous people, 10% non-Indigenous people. And it was very raw, very angry about injustices that had happened in residential schools and the intergenerational effects of that. And the dialogue evolved over the 7 events to still be angry. I mean, one of his lines is that I really like is, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, for Edmontonians to have the opportunity to take that journey, and thousands of people, including thousands of school children from Edmonton, from diverse backgrounds, had the opportunity to come and to learn. There was a lot of media coverage. But the legacies that came out of it for the city of Edmonton, the municipality, were specifically 3 things that we committed to, and then other things that have arisen since. But the 3 things we committed to were workplace training for our employees. So we have 11,000 people, many of whom work on the front line and serve people from all kinds of backgrounds, including Indigenous people. And we wanted to make sure that our staff had some learning opportunities about historical trauma in residential schools in particular, and more generally about some of the systemic injustices that are faced by Indigenous people through legislation, through the way the reserve system is administered by the federal government, and so on. And so we kicked off that program last fall, and with a large event with Wab Canoe, who spoke to most of the senior staff at the city of Edmonton, as well as youth who were invited, and we did some reconciliation workshops as well. And I could see the shock and the shame that fellow Canadians in my workplace felt learning about what happened, because this is something that's still not broadly understood. And so we wanted to make sure that our staff had that learning, and started with the managers essentially, and then now we're working into each one of the workplaces in the city of Edmonton with great support from our unions and so on. So we really want to raise awareness within our own workplace and model that and share the material that we've developed with other employers who are looking to do the same thing. So workplace training was one of the first things that we set about doing. The second was partnering to develop some ceremonial spaces within the city so that it's easier for urban Aboriginal people to be able to connect with culture and to be able to sustain traditional practices here in the city. And so we're working on altogether, I think, 4 different sites now, including the largest, which is the Kiichiaski project, which is the old Fox Farms area in White Mud Creek. And so we funded the first phase of that in our most recent budget. And so that will allow the site to be prepped and the first sort of basic set of lodges and amenities to be developed there. And it's on a transit line. It's inside the city. It's a beautiful site. It's a traditional site as well. There are medicines in that ravine, and there'll be the opportunity to develop a medicine garden and so on. So it's going to be a beautiful space for all Edmontonians to enjoy, but specifically for Indigenous people.
That's fantastic. When is the completion date for that?
Well, that's a good question. I think some of the work is happening on demolition of the old buildings and cleanup of the site over the next year. And then the future phases will require partnerships with other funders to get to completion. But there are already traditional practices occurring there. Right. So that we're just getting the site really set up and making it safe and making it viable for the long term. So it's already in use. It's just going to be improved further, and the city's sort of first in to fund that in partnership with the Native Counseling Services.
That's fantastic.
And then the third thing we're working on is youth leadership, and that's intercultural youth leadership. So the city's got a great tradition of work with our next gen group and our City of Edmonton Youth Council, but we really want to expand that to include some youth leadership opportunities for Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth to work together on projects that contribute to reconciliation. So we're trying very hard not to dictate what that will be, but to actually hear from youth. And so coming up in March, we have a conference with 700 students from diverse backgrounds around the city, including Indigenous youth, who are going to come together to tell us what they want to do from a youth leadership point of view in order to really catapult reconciliation forward. So we've had this year of transforming our own thinking at the City of Edmonton. Now we need to populate the city and really seed future generations to carry on this work, because I was at a gathering of the honorary witnesses, and I was honored to be asked to be one of those people. I was at a gathering in the fall, and a number of us who were on, say, the south side of 50 challenged ourselves with realizing that it's not, a day's worth of work or a year's worth of work. It's really an intergenerational undertaking to address and reconcile what occurred over, 5 or 6 generations in residential schools. And so we need to involve young people in order for that to be successful. And so those are the 3 threads: the workplace training, the ceremonial spaces within the city, and youth leadership. And then along the way, we've started to come up with a whole bunch of other things that we can do, which is all about ultimately ensuring that Indigenous people from all backgrounds feel safe and included in the city of Edmonton and celebrated for the richness that their cultures contribute.
100%. That's fantastic. And, like you said, once again, we have the mayor of Edmonton with us this morning, Don Iveson. It's funny that you talk about the workplace training, because that incident with Gary Moostus at City Centre Mall, you talk about that and the sensitivity. I think a lot of times it just, like you said, people were shocked and upset by what they were learning, because a lot of times it's not a necessary intention of insulting someone. It's just not knowing what had happened. And to be able to just bring information forward is enough to get people to go, okay, I didn't realize this is what happened. So that makes people move forward, and to get the kids involved. The kids are, it's a cliche, but the kids are the future. And to have that kind of a gathering and people relating, then you can stop, like you said, that systemic behavior by starting the kids off and getting them to give their opinions and continue on with that knowledgeable behavior as years move on.
Well, and we can begin to address stigma, before it gets cemented later in life, and we can create positive relations between different groups, and that's all about cultural understanding. That's what multiculturalism really is. And but it's important for settlers and descendants of settlers to understand the context of the treaties and what they all oblige us to, and Treaty 6 in particular, as it relates to this territory, because there is a special relationship and special status for Indigenous people, and with good reason. And so making people aware of that history is important. And so one of the things, and it was one of the first things that I did, it was the first thing that I did actually after I was sworn in as mayor, was acknowledge that this is Treaty 6 territory, which had never happened before in the same way. And I now open every official council meeting every 2 weeks. We have our big main council meeting, and that's how I start, is with an acknowledgement of treaty. And so making all of us aware of what that of the spirit of the treaty, which is about shared prosperity and ensuring that people are doing well on all sides. And that's not really about sides. It's about peaceful cohabitation of these lands. I think that awareness is equally important. It provides a context, and then to understand that what happened in residential schools was really an attempt to civilize, but it was absolutely misguided, and has created a wake of trauma that is going to take some time to undo, and going to require the support of many different people in many different sectors in order to ensure that people have good parenting skills again. Because if you were raised in a residential school and not by your own parents, right, then you're at a disadvantage when you're raising your own family. If you were deprived of nutrition, then that's that's going to affect your development, your success in life. And most importantly, if you are subject to spiritual or physical or sexual abuse, that's going to affect your station in life. So when people say, well, why is it that a group of people are and you hear this in the stigmas, and we still hear this, and it's one of the still socially acceptable forms of racism that we still encounter in our community. And we have to stand up against that, but also bring some compassion and understanding to why Indigenous people are overrepresented in poverty, overrepresented in homelessness. Is because of these systemic injustices, systemic marginalizations, and we need to work together to reverse those in culturally sensitive ways. And so, having had the opportunity to talk about those things for the last year and to take those messages to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, to share with other mayors, and I'm not the only one working on this. The mayor of Vancouver is very strong on this. The new mayor of Winnipeg is very strong on this. So there's a coalition of people coming together at the city level to address these questions of how do we make sure that Indigenous people are successful and safe and included, participating in urban life.
That's
and
right.
It's a great challenge. It's a huge opportunity because it's a young, growing, enthusiastic population. And so I'm glad that we're the fastest growing Aboriginal population in the country. I think that speaks well of our city, that it's an attractive place, that people are drawn here for the same reasons that people from all backgrounds are drawn here. We just need to make sure that everybody feels included and that everybody prospers here.
That's right.
And there's also that partnership with the City of Edmonton, Fort Edmonton Park, and the Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations signing that historic agreement just a short while ago.
Yeah, that's a very encouraging development, and there's going to be some similar work with the Métis Nation as well. But starting with Treaty 6, to ensure that the narrative at Fort Edmonton, which is one of the places where Edmonton has done its storytelling about its history. The problem is the story really started in 1795, or at least the colonial version of the story starts in 1795 when the first traders show up. But there's thousands and thousands of years of really rich and diverse history before that deserves acknowledgement as well. The story of contact, which is really one of Aboriginal people saving the struggling Europeans.
That's right.
And getting them through some winters that they probably wouldn't have survived otherwise. I mean, that's a bit of an equalizer of the story. It's not it's not Europeans showing up and conquering. It's
flourishing.
It's
that's right.
It's actually much more interdependent, and then that narrative as a platform for talking about the real history of the treaties, I think, is a much richer story and a much more respectful story than the one that we've traditionally told. And so decolonizing the narrative at Fort Edmonton is going to take some time, but the folks at the fort are really focused on it, and it's a goodwill, a relationship building exercise with Treaty 6, who will be involved in that new storytelling. So I'm thrilled about that development.
Yeah.
Perfect. Mayor Iveson, just before we let you go, I wanted to talk to you because we do have such a wide listening base, and we have listeners in Fort McMurray, High Level, Lac La Biche. Are you looking to foster a relationship with those northern mayors as well?
Absolutely. We actually meet a few times a year through the Alberta, the AUMA, which is the Alberta
Urban Municipalities. There we go.
I'm blanking out on the acronym. It's the Urban Municipalities Association. So we get together once a year that way, and then we have a Northern Mayors group that actually just met last week, and so we get together and talk about issues and get presentations that are relevant to us. We actually did a reconciliation workshop with that group of mayors in October, I think, last year, and talked to them about our workplace learning initiatives. There was lots of interest from a number of the mayors. So we debate everything from oil prices to transportation infrastructure to responsible resource development, to railway safety, to cultural inclusion, to temporary foreign workers. So yeah, we get together usually in Edmonton, but it looks like next year we'll have a meeting in Fort McMurray, and the year after that probably in Grand Prairie. So we try to move it around, try to see a bit of northern Alberta, and certainly stay close because Edmonton being the sort of service center for northern Alberta and northern Canada, it's very important for us to maintain those relationships. And so actually the first outreach trip that I took as mayor was actually to Wood Buffalo to to meet with the mayor there, meet with business leaders there, meet with First Nations leaders there, and just start to forge relationships there, because what happens in Northern Alberta is critically important to Edmonton's success.
Perfect. Awesome.
All right.
Well, we thank you so much for stopping by. I was going to ask you about this roundtable coming up with missing and murdered Aboriginal women, but you know what? Everything that you said leading up to that shows me that you're also on board with prevention and people being, culturally sensitive to the issues of why this systemic stuff is still happening. So, I mean, unless you wanted to mention that, it is coming up, and as far as the national inquiry goes, a lot of city mayors are hopping on board. What do you think about that?
Our council hasn't taken a specific position on it, but certainly my view is that there should be some sort of national dialogue about this, whether it's an inquiry, whether it's a roundtable. Whatever the format is matters less to me than that we actually get honest with ourselves about the stark reality that Indigenous women are 4 times more likely to be subject to murder or serious violence than non-Indigenous women. And when you see an overrepresentation that's that glaring, morally, I'm offended by that. I'm upset by that as a human being. But as a decision maker driven by data, I would see that as a huge outlier that begs the next question, which is, why is that? And most importantly, what are we going to do to change that? And that's the real conversation we need to get to in this country. And it's especially relevant to leaders in large Canadian cities, because that's where we see a lot of the violence happening. And so we're saddened to hear of every instance of it. And then when they mount up into these staggering numbers, obviously this needs to be taken seriously by all orders of government.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. We had the mayor of Edmonton with us this morning, Don Iveson, and we thank you so much, and we'd love to have you back again soon and get some updates from you, because there's always really cool and exciting stuff happening in our city.
Look forward to it.